Welcome everyone to a tier list discussion about the Champions of Summoner Wars 2nd Edition. And I've already done a video prior to this where I discussed my thoughts on the faction strength. But yeah, this time I'm just going to give you my thoughts on champion strength and whether I think a champion's weaker or stronger or somewhere in between. But yeah, unlike last time where I categorized them as like S tier, A tier, B tier, I just gave each tier a specific name to be a little more clear as to how, what I mean when I place them there. So yeah, I just call them overpowered, dominant, strong, decent, weak, highly situational, and underpowered. And yeah, I'm gonna be covering up through champions up through Avians and Cloaks, and anything beyond that, yeah, maybe in a future video I'll cover them. But that's where I'm at right now. So let's get into this. Yeah, so I'm going to go over breakers first. We've got Goldune here. Goldune is, that's an easy one for me to put in strong. I feel like that's a strong champion. I think his ability of telepathic command is really good. Especially, I mean, all you have to do pretty much is activate it like at least twice, and I feel like you're already getting good value. Yeah, just having at least 2 commons already attack for free already seems good. Yeah, and he's just really good when it comes to like wiping the board, and he's just good at like taking out high value targets like champions or possibly summoners. Yeah, he's just a major threat when breakers have high magic. Yeah, despite his low health, which I guess his low health is definitely a weak point here. It holds him back a little bit. Yeah, he's not so good in those matchups where like where your opponent is playing the range game. Yeah, so that's holding him back as well. But otherwise, he's a quite solid champion, I think. Okay, Gwalark, on the other hand, is going to be going... I'm going to put him on the lower end, like, probably weak. I'd call Gwalark weak. Now, he's definitely a champion that's grown on me over time, though. Like, in the early days, I wasn't really summoning him a whole lot, but I found more uses for him lately, and he does come out occasionally. Especially, like, I think he's pretty good when it comes to finishing off low-health summoners. He's a big threat, a big assassination threat in those cases. And yeah, in breakers, often I'm finding that they're fairly good at assassination, so he's good in those situations. But yeah, the downside is that it's a high magic cost, so like even when you get your opponent down to that low of magic, it's kind of hard to have that much magic on top of having Gwalark at the same time. And I guess the other problem with him is that his stats just aren't good for the cost, so you're just not going to be playing him just as like a value unit. He's just more for those assassination attempts, I feel like. Yeah, just a bit weak, just not a champion I'll be bringing out a whole lot. And then we have Kalal, who I'd say falls somewhere in between those 2 champs. So like decent feels right to me. Yeah, Kalal's decent, but yeah, it's just like sometimes she feels like she overperforms, sometimes she feels like she underperforms. And yeah, she's like she's got a big magic cost at 7, so for a big investment, she can be good, but it is kind of a risk at the same time. Like if you lose her quickly, that's a big loss. Yeah, and sometimes I just question, should I really be investing this much when like this faction has so many good commons? Maybe I should just be playing more commons instead. But there are those games where Kalal can like really be taking out unit after unit, and your opponent can't do much about it. Like she's really good when it comes to like focus firing on a single unit. Yeah, just overall decent, I guess. Can be good. Sometimes kind of risky. Moving on now to the Cave Goblins, we have Blarf, and Blarf I feel is one of the strongest champions of the game. Honestly, like I'd put him all the way up here, all the way up to dominant. And okay, what I like about Blarf is that I feel like he's pretty much always giving you positive value, and that's what I really look for in a unit. And yeah, so I feel like, okay, let's say you invest just 1 or 2 magic in him, and your opponent kills him. Like typically, your opponent's gonna have to spend more resources to kill him than you invested in him. So already in that sense, like he's good. And even if he ever gets up to like max attack, 5 attack, that's really threatening. He's like the most dangerous unit on Cave Goblins at that point. And yeah, he could even attack multiple times with Enrage the Horde, which is scary. and he's fairly easy to keep safe, like especially with your summoner being able to like swap positions with him. Yeah, just I mean, just all around a great unit, I feel, and I just can't think of any negatives. Next is Smeg, and Smeg isn't performing nearly as well as Blarf, even though like both of them you're playing nearly every match. I'd say Smeg is like decent. Uh, yeah, Smeg, but you're also like not losing much value with Smeg either, which is nice. So yeah, he's pretty consistent in that way. But yeah, occasionally you can get some value like by attacking and then denying your opponent magic by using that magic junkie ability to just let him disappear. So that's nice. Um, but I guess the only reason I wouldn't put him higher is because he's not really like typically furthering your offense, and a lot of times you need to be really offensive and get into those threatening positions, and he's not really helping you advance forward in that sense. But in pretty much any other type of situation where you got to play range, yeah, he's very very useful to have. So yeah, I guess falls somewhere in the middle for me. Now the Eater, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put pretty low. Like, highly situational sounds about right to me. Yeah, it's very situational where you're gonna bring the Eater out. Like, frankly, pretty much mostly belongs in your discard pile. But yeah, there's situations where he can be good. Like the problem is that the magic cost is pretty high, especially for a unit where you can't be sure that he's gonna stick around for very long. But due to his ability, and like your opponent can kind of play around that ability sometimes, so it's a big risk to invest this much magic into something that you're not sure might work. But yeah, there can definitely be situations where he's good, like against factions that give away a lot of magic, like Fallen Kingdom. Like he's very playable, and yeah, occasionally in a random game, you might be in that right situation with a lot of magic to bring him out. But yeah, for the most part, pretty underwhelming unit though. Next, we have the Cloaks Champions, who I haven't played nearly as much as the other champs, just because this faction's newer. But yeah, in my limited plays, I'll just give you my current impressions on them so far. So the Admiral, I'd say, is going to be the hardest one for me to place, and only because I don't seem to bring him out that often. Like, I feel like his high magic cost is going to be preventing me from like summoning him frequently. However, like the games that he does come out, he seems to have a pretty big impact on the board, and like he's really good at helping convert like a good position into a winning position. He'll definitely like help snowball that game with his ability to let you attack for free. So in that sense, I do like him, but I'm just gonna say he's decent for now. Like the only problem is that like everything else on this team is so good that like all the commons are so good that I feel like you just might not have the magic consistently to summon the Admiral. And yeah, I guess I just feel like everything else is so good. Like, what do I really need him? And I guess the other thing that maybe prevents him from being higher for me is like I feel like if he comes out on a board where you don't have like an already well-established position with a couple units on the board, I feel like he's not doing a whole lot to like save that position. So in that sense, I think he's just decent, but I could change my mind on the future on this one. Next we have Dagger, who definitely feels like one of the strongest champs in the game to me. Like I'm saying high tier for sure. I'm gonna put Dagger up in dominant. Yeah, honestly it feels like Dagger is like the face of Cloaks, and most games seem to revolve around Dagger play and like trying to get Dagger in a position to backstab for that 5 attack. Yeah, I mean, she's just got like such good threat potential for being a low magic cost unit, and like she's just so good at taking out single targets because due to Sly. So yeah, and yeah, I just feel like she has really good surprise attack, a good surprise attack element. So yeah, it's very hard to face Cloaks when they've got like just a decent magic pool just due to Dagger. So overall, yeah, just very very strong. Sin's a little harder to place. She's kind of like a support champion almost, and yeah, she reminds me of Smeg in a lot of ways. So I think she's decent. Like she doesn't have a big board presence herself, but she is a nice addition to the team. She's like a good support to Dagger. yeah, she really supports Dagger and having that extra unit to swap places with. I think that's important. Having like an extra zero cost unit on this team. So in that sense, I think she's good. But yeah, of course, the bounty ability is quite terrible, giving three extra magic when she dies to your opponent. That you cannot afford to let her die. It's a big liability. But this team, I think, generally wants to go more for assassination than the long game. So it's not the worst thing ever. And yeah, she kind of just fits the theme of the deck to me. So I think she's just decent. All right, next we have Fallen Kingdom, who are not known for having very good champions. However, Dragos is easily the best champion, I think, on this faction. He's pretty good. He's like borderline strong or decent for me. I'd probably lean more towards decent though. I could be convinced he's strong. He's close, but he's a little hard to get on the board at 6. The 6 magic cost is always a little hard to get on the board. Plus, yeah, I feel like if you hold on to him for very long, you could definitely get yourself into trouble, and you kind of just have to draw him at the right time. But his ability of Life Drain is actually, it synergizes very well with this team, even though like the ability on its own maybe isn't the greatest. But yeah, for Fallen Kingdom, just being able to like guarantee kills and sacrificing your units is the theme of the team. So yeah, all of that can help to boost your other units' attack power, or it could actually increase your pyre turns. So I think he just synergizes well, and yeah, so he's decent but almost strong. He's close. Elu's Ball will be a trickier one to place. He's sometimes he feels really bad to me, like down here and highly situational, but other times he is helping me win games. So I kind of feel like I'd put him in weak. He's probably helping me win enough random games to where I'd call him just weak. He can be good because of the surprise element. Like he could just randomly pop out with 6 attack and kill something. That's nice. And if you can get him like in one lane where he can't really be hit from multiple sides, like he could actually be good at like one-shotting things in that situation. But otherwise, he's just too high of a cost. 6 magic cost plus destroying a unit on top of that, all for 6 health is not good. Yeah, just 6 health is really bad for all that. I just think they went a little too hard on the 666 theme with him. And if they hadn't gone that direction so hard, maybe he could have been statted a little better. But overall, just a little weak. And then we have Goldos, who often gets talked about as being one of the weakest champions in the game. And yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that, actually. He's pretty weak. He's going to go pretty low. I'll put him in highly situational. I'm not gonna put him as low as underpowered. Like I'm reserving that for champions that I think really would like need a buff. But I think he's actually playable, and I mean, it's in the rare situations that he comes out, I think there are times when he can be good. So yeah, I think the weakness though is that like he can kind of be played around. Like when he's on the board, he doesn't have that big of an impact typically, and like your opponent can kind of play around him and ignore him for a while, and then maybe once he's exposed, they might just take him out fairly quickly. So like, and his ability, like it seems like it might be good in theory, but it just in practice it just doesn't seem to work out that well. And you know, he's got the somewhat high magic cost. But I don't think he's unplayable or anything. I think he's very playable in certain matchups. It's very matchup dependent for me. Like I think he's pretty good against Cave Goblins. I'll actually play him quite a bit against Cave Goblins. Maybe against Vanguards too, in kind of situations where your opponent has to like chew through your units and can't really ignore them. He can be okay. So yeah, that's where I'll put him. Moving on now to the Phoenix Elves champs. Vanessa is going to be like an easy top tier for me. She's going to go near the top. I'll put her up in Dominant. Yeah, she's like my go-to champion on Phoenix Elves. Yeah, I feel like she just has very high potential for getting a lot of value from her cost, and that's a lot of times that's what I look for in a unit, and that's why I value high health so much. There's just so much potential. And like against melee units, she's super good. very hard to deal with, and she is kind of matchup dependent though, so that that holds her back a bit because against more ranged factions and more ranged units, she's not going to do as well. But overall, I think she just has a good board presence, and she's just hard to deal with. Okay, Fire Drake's going to be a tricky one for me to place because for such a high cost champion, he's surprisingly playable. Like a lot of times, it's really hard to get out the high cost champs, but for 8 cost, I think his stats are actually pretty decent. Like if you're going to dump a lot of magic into a champion, like he's not a bad choice. But all that being said, though, I think he's still like a bit weak. Like I could be convinced maybe he's decent. I'll just put him at the top of weak though. Like, I also like that he can be summoned without a gate, so that's useful as like a backup option if you lose all your gates. And Fire Breath is like not a great ability, but as an assassination tool, sometimes like it could be useful. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the problem with Fire Drake though is that when he's summoned on the board, typically you're going to be out of units and you can't really summon other units, so he's kind of fighting on his own sometimes, which maybe isn't always the greatest. But yeah, I don't know, he comes out in a surprising number of games that I play against strong players. Like, he actually comes out sometimes, so yeah, just a bit weak, I guess. Holios will be a pretty easy one for me to place. I'll just put her straight into the strong tier. Yeah, I really like Holios and her ability of Fiery Summon, which, essentially turns her into this mobile summoning station, which no other champion, has anything quite like that. It's very unique, and it leads to some very dynamic, interesting positions that no other, faction is capable of doing. So that's very interesting. But I also like the Ignite ability, which can strengthen your other units and you can get some good value out of that ability as well. Now, the only thing holding her back, though, is that I feel like you have to draw her at the right time in order to play her. Like, if she's at the end of your deck, she's not nearly as good, of course, and even if you draw her early, I feel like sometimes it's hard to get her out. But I guess overall she's reliable champion. All right, next is Polar Dwarves, who have a pretty good lineup of champions, actually. So starting with Jarmund, I'm going to put Jarmund pretty high, all the way up in Dominant tier. He's a pretty top tier champion, I think. The community actually rated him #1 overall, which surprised me a little bit because I don't see Jarmund as being like a clear #1 or anything. But he is definitely one of the most dominant champs right now. Due to his ability of Ice Shards, and Ice Shards is just a ridiculous ability. I mean, you can get just an insane amount of value out of that, and the ceiling is very high. Yeah, sometimes he'll just run away with games just due to that. But I do feel like he performs differently depending on the matchup. Like he performs really well against melee factions, I think. But against the range heavy factions, or like when they switch to range, I don't think he's performing nearly as well. And, at 7 health, it's not like he's that hard to kill. Like if someone wants to spend a lot of resources, they can definitely get to him sometimes. But yeah, all in all, he definitely is one of the best champs. I could probably see that. But still, it requires a little bit of setup. So yeah, not I don't think he's overpowered, but I'll just say that. Nadiana is going to be an interesting one because I feel like there's a lot of different opinions on her strength level. Like some will say she's stronger, some will say she's weaker. I'm personally in the camp that I think she's on the stronger end. In fact, I'd put her in strong tier, near the top of it. In fact, like sometimes I feel like she's even higher, and I probably used to think she was higher than this, but I think due to her 6 magic cost, it's a little bit on the higher end, so that kind of has her drop down a bit for me. But I think overall she performs very similarly to Jarmund, actually, and they require like a similar amount of board setup, and they fulfill similar roles even, so you kind of can just discard one and play the other. So that's why I really like the Polar Dwarves champ selection. But yeah, I think she just has a very good board presence. Her ability can very easily get her up to 4 to 5 attack. That's just not hard to do. And you could be one-shotting units, which saves you on how many attacks you have to do each turn. I like that. And yeah, I think another strength she has is that she performs pretty consistently well across all the different matchups. Whereas like For Jarmund, I feel like he's a little bit more polarizing. But yeah, overall, I think she's pretty strong. Next, we have Olag, and Olag I think is a pretty straightforward champ. Like sometimes I think he performs well, but sometimes he performs poorly. So like overall, I think he kind of falls somewhere in between. So I'll say he's decent. Like I think he's performing pretty well in the matchups where like your opponent's coming to you and the fight takes place on your side of the board. But if you have to be the aggressor, like I don't think he's that great. But yeah, I think in the situations where he's good, like he's able to get a lot of value from his cold snap ability, and you can get extra value from all your parapets and your ice golems and all your structures. So yeah, he's great in that sense. But I mean, I guess he's also not bad because he's 5 costs. So I mean, how bad could a 5 cost unit really be? Yeah, overall, I'd say he's decent. Okay, next we have Savanna Elves, starting with Makendaru, who I believe to be the strongest champion in the game right now, personally. I'm going to put her at the very top, and I guess the question is, would I put her in overpowered or dominant? Like, it's pretty close, but honestly, like, I think she's a little overpowered, a little bit overtuned. I feel like she probably should have, like, 1 less HP. I practically summon her every game, and I don't know. I think she's just better than every other unit below her when it comes to like consistently getting good value from the cost. That's why I put her so high, and that's often what I look for in a unit. And that's I often play for like some sort of economic advantage. So maybe that fits into my play style. But yeah, I think she just has very high attack, very high health for the cost. Swift Shot, I think, is a good ability because you can sometimes kill multiple different units in the same attack and sometimes in different directions. I think she synergizes well with Savanna Elves. She really helps the range game a lot, which is big. And she's a good target for like Chant of Power. So yeah, all in all, I can't think of really any negatives here. Just an awesome champion. All right, Midi Kairu is going to be a really tricky one for me to pinpoint, and that's just due to me hardly ever getting a chance to summon him. Despite that, though, I think he's still really good. Like I'll put him all the way up here in dominant tier. I just don't know exactly how good he is because I haven't had a chance to really summon him. I just summon Makendaru so much more often. I think she just fits my playstyle more, but yeah, despite that, I still think Kairu is very good because he has very high like single target damage with he has 4 melee attack, which is very very good for the cost, and his ability of withdraw can also help take down a single target because he can attack, move out of the way, and then another unit attacks. I think that's good, and I think the withdraw ability is also good because he can attack and then just move to safety in general. That's like such an important concept in Summoner Wars, is to be safe after you attack. So overall, yeah, very, very strong unit. Okay, so I guess to balance out the really good champions for Savanna Elves, we have a really bad champion here in Mitimumwe. In fact, I think he's the worst champion in the game. I'm gonna just throw him straight into underpowered. The giant tree, yeah, he's just plain not good. In fact, I've never even seen him summoned in one of my own games, not by me or my opponents. I just don't think he's really practical to summon due to his high summon cost. 8 cost is very high, plus you really have to be putting some boosts on him to make him decent, so just the cost is too high. He probably needs a lower summon cost to make him practical. And since I've literally never seen him in a game, I don't know that I have much more to say about him. I mean, maybe if the other 2 champs on this faction weren't so amazing, maybe he would stand out a bit more, but yeah, I don't know. Now we have Skyspear Avians, which is a faction that's relatively new, so I don't have nearly as many games in with them, but I do feel like I've got a pretty good feel for the champs at this point. Now Guilford, I'd say, it's kind of hard to pinpoint for me, but like I'll say he's decent. Like I don't know that I'm going to be summoning Guilford in that many games. But I do think he's got some pretty good threat potential with having both the flight and bully abilities. So like I think he'd be good at finishing off low health summoners, and yeah, he's already helped me win a few games up to this point. So I feel like he's definitely at least decent. Um, Now, yeah, as far as like being a value unit, like I don't think you're gonna play him for that. He's a little bit weaker on that in that sense, but he just kind of seems like a slightly better and more affordable version of Gualark to me. Wrath is a champion that I find a bit more difficult to get out on the board, but maybe that's just due to the higher magic cost. I guess in general, I feel like he's a bit weak, so I'll throw him in weak, but I think it's also has something to do with the Avians. Like the Avians have such good commons that I don't know that it makes much sense to invest this big into a champion. It's just kind of a case where like everything else on the team is so good that I find it hard to get Wrath out sometimes. But I do like the prey ability because that gives you access to different types of assassination attempts that you wouldn't normally have access to. So in that sense, it's a nice threat against certain factions or in certain situations. But yeah, I just don't think it's something that's gonna come up a lot in my games. And next we have Cyruk, who is definitely the key champ of the Avians, and it certainly is my go-to champion pick. So I'd put him pretty high. Actually, I'd put him up in dominant. He's quite good all around. Yeah, he's really capable of getting a lot of value from his ability. It's very easy to get him to 4 attack, and then he synergizes really well with his event cards. So it's super easy just to be one-shotting things with him. I guess the weaknesses though is that like you can't really just summon him by himself on the battlefield. It requires a little bit of setup, but I don't think it's all that hard to set him up really. And then I guess the other big weakness is that he's got somewhat low health, so he's a bit more vulnerable. But all in all, I think he's a really dominant champion. Moving on now to the Tundra Orcs, who all around have a really good champion selection, I feel. Yeah, starting with Ragnar, I actually like Ragnar quite a lot. I think he's pretty strong. I'll actually put him up here in strong tier. So I think he synergizes very well with Tundra Orcs, actually, and he just works with their attacking plans very well. So if you want to get some good offensive momentum going, I think he's very important in supporting that. His ability is not very good, but it almost doesn't even matter. I think he's even good even without it activating. I feel like at a minimum, like he's at least getting you equal to better value usually. That's why I think he's on the stronger end. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Shonk is a champ I evaluate very highly myself, and maybe my evaluation is going to surprise some people, but I feel like Shonk is one of the best champs in the game, if not the best. Like I feel like an argument could definitely be made for him being the best. I'm going to put him on the same level as Bakendaru for me, overpowered. I think he's really strong. He's just pure value. Like you just get so much health and attack for the cost, and your opponent has to use so many resources to take him down. Yeah, and I guess the one downside maybe is that he can sometimes be avoided, but for the most part, they're gonna have to go through him eventually. And yeah, I don't know. He's also threatening in like some very specific ways. Like you could put him up against a gate or a champion or a summoner, and he could randomly roll a high attack, and like so yeah, like your opponent's definitely gonna be afraid to put a champion against him just in that event. So yeah, I don't know. All around, I feel like he could use one less health, I think, and still be very strong. So yeah, just an amazing value unit. Targan is going to be harder for me to evaluate because I don't summon her nearly as often as I do the other two Tundra Orcs champs. But that doesn't necessarily mean she's weak. I mean, I think she's quite strong, actually. Like, I'm going to put her up here in strong. Yeah, I think she can pretty much outrange anything. So that's what makes her really good. I mean, she just dominates the range game and can single-handedly win games because of it. Now, the problem is I don't think she synergizes all that well with Tundra Orcs, who often play like a more offensive momentum-based game. So in that sense, like, I think she could be better on a different faction. Like if she was playing on a more defensive faction, I mean, she could really be dominating the range game. But here, like I often feel like I just have to pitch her because she's not going to work in my position. Um, but yeah, I don't know. For any other type of game where I'm not like always on this aggressive offense, like I think she works really well, and yeah, it can be quite good. And finally, we have Vanguards, which is a faction I don't play a whole lot myself, but I've played enough to know that Colleen is like definitely their strongest champion. As for how strong, that's kind of hard for me to say because I feel like she's kind of bordering between top of decent, bottom of strong area for me. Like, I could go either way, but I'll probably settle with decent, only because like I feel like the champs above her are probably a bit more reliable and easier to hit the board. Like, I feel like Colleen, you really have to draw her at the right time in order to play her. Especially if she's at the bottom of the deck, then it's probably not good. But yeah, even if you draw her too early, it can also be hard to hold on to her for very long. But I mean, she does have some strengths, and like the divine shield ability can really get you a lot of good value if you're negating a lot of attacks. And if you're able to like heal her, you can get some extra value that way. But yeah, I just feel like in general she's a bit random, but in the right circumstances she can be very good. And next we have Jacob, and yeah, Jacob I would put very close to the bottom. In fact, I'd say he's underpowered. I think he needs some help. Almost as bad as the tree, maybe slightly more playable. I mean, I've seen him come out in a handful of games. Not sure that he performed that well, but yeah, I don't know. You practically need like 9 or 11 magic to really make a significant impact with him, and I mean, those requirements are just way too high. Like his stats are just really really bad for the cost. Yeah, I like if you compare him to Targan, for example. Targan has the same summon cost, same health, but already has a base attack of 4 instead of 2. Yeah, so Jacob would need 4 extra magic just to hit the same level of attack. Plus Targan has longer range and another positive ability on top of that. So just his stats just kind of don't make sense. Yeah, I think he just needs a little bit of help. And last we have Valna. So Valna is a champion that I feel is capable of making a very big impact, but like often she just doesn't work out as I plan. So ultimately, like I guess I'd put her in weak. Like she feels a bit weak, but there are definitely times when Valna comes out and it's super hard to deal with her when she's got her engine started with like a couple units on the board. She's up to like 4 plus attack. That's really hard to deal with sometimes. Especially if she can start getting healed by priests during this process. Yeah, then she's getting a lot of good value. But I think just the thing holding her back is just there's such a high magic cost involved with all this. You probably need her and at least one other common, so you're already at 8 magic and probably need to start building more as you're doing this. So there's just a lot of, I feel like, requirements to get her engine started. So that's why she's almost there, but just falls a little bit on the weak side for me. So that's the list. Yeah, I've gone through all 30 champs now, and I'm noticing that like a lot of them fall under like the decent or lower than that range, which I kind of wish more would fall under strong, because I feel like if a champion is strong, then it gives you like a more clear purpose as to why you should be summoning them. Yeah, but it is at least nice to see that like a majority of them are like around strong. At least they're in that zone. So I'm pretty happy about that. Yeah, and there's really only a few major outliers on the bottom and top, which is nice. So yeah, just tell me your thoughts on where you agree, where you disagree, and maybe how you evaluate things differently than me. I'm always interested in that type of discussion, like how different people evaluate the units. So yeah, and just thank you as always for watching.